Hello, welcome to Inspect, a podcast about web design and development. My name is Ajay, and with me as usual is Kay. How's it going, Kay?
Nice. All good. How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, not too bad. Do you want to let us know what we're talking about today?
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about inspiration. So whether that's design inspiration or technical coding inspiration. We're just going to talk about the things that inspire us to create our websites and our coding practices and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Yeah. And so what I've done is for this episode, it's going to be a quick fire episode. And what I've done is I've kind of drafted about 5 or 6 questions which I want to fire at you. And what I'll do once I've got your answer, I kind of I'll just add on my answer to them as well, or my opinions and views. So let's get into it. And so I think question number 1 is obviously going to be, where do you go for your design inspiration?
I think most of my design inspiration, as most people, it probably comes from Dribbble. I tend to go to Dribbble. I used to go to Dribbble quite a lot, and I used to post on there as well when I used to do a lot more design work. But I don't do as much these days. So I just jump in every now and then, go to Dribbble, and I tend to go there when I'm looking for inspiration on a particular thing, rather than just to get sort of blanket inspiration across every sort of type of design. So, for example, if I'm designing like a shopping basket widget or a chat window, then I might just go on Dribbble and I'll just see what the sort of trends are. If people are doing something particularly new, or is the trend leaning towards a particular color or a particular sort of style. And then I'll normally find 2 or 3 examples of something that I like, maybe take some screenshots, and then bring those into Sketch and use those as a bit of a mood board to give me like a starting point. And then I do a similar sort of thing on Behance as well. But I think when I'm going on Behance, it's more general browsing, because obviously Dribbble's just got these like small shots, right? Just small bits of UI without any real context, whereas Behance is more like case studies about certain projects. So I tend to spend a lot more time on Behance reading over the projects and the reason for the choices, and then scrolling through their sort of long posts and seeing how they got to their final the final output. So in terms of design, that's the main place really, is Dribbble.
Cool. So I don't really use Dribbble myself. So the Behance is the one that you mentioned there. That's one that I actually do go to. So I'll actually kind of screenshot things from there, and then I'll create like a mood board as well. So I'll do similar kind of thing to you do. But I've never actually used Dribbble. I don't know why. I've just never kind of gone that way. But Behance works for me, and some of the other sites out there that I've been using would be like the awards.com website. So award-winning kind of web design and things like that. So I look at that quite a lot to pick up on trends and various different things. So you've got quite a lot of varying sort of approaches to web design on there. So I do tend to go and look at that quite a bit. Do you ever look at competitors? So, for example, the agency you're working for, would they have any sort of like direct competitors in the industry? And would you ever look at their kind of work or case studies or portfolio, things like that?
I think we don't really look at competing agency work, but when we get a client, then we will ask the client who their competitors are, and then we'll do our research based on that. So if we're doing a medical client, then we'll go look at other medical websites, for example, and just get some trends there. One thing I used to do, I don't do it very very much these days, but there was a website called Template Monster where you could buy and download website templates, and they used to have really good categorization of all their templates. So if you did have a client of a particular industry, you could chances are that Template Monster had that industry on their categories. And they used to have a massive library of designs. Some of them were a bit basic, and a lot of them did look very similar, where there's just like a color or a font was changed. But it was a quick way to get some quick inspiration on sites that are in a similar industry when you haven't necessarily got a competitor's site to look at, if you know what I mean.
Right. Okay. That's cool. Yeah, I remember I used to use that myself back in the day, and I think it's kind of evolved now. It's still there. I find myself going to Theme Forest on Envato. They've got really good categorization on there, and I tend to find really, really good looking, whether it's like a HTML sort of like, landing page concept or a full website theme. Envato's got some really, really good sort of like, off the shelf templates, which I tend to go to and get some ideas from. So I think that's probably the big one now. I do like that one. Do you ever find yourself looking at some of these? I know a while ago we kind of got ourselves into blockchain, and all these sort of blockchain style websites were like creeping up everywhere, and they're all following this kind of trend, which is the next thing I want to move on to. But do you ever find yourself looking at these kind of like tech sites, like Tide, Monzo, and Airbnb? They kind of like create or invent a new style, and all of a sudden everyone's kind of following that kind of trend. So whether you've got big and bold sort of like typefaces and bright colors, or whether you're going for a minimal kind of approach where there's a lot of white space, I'm finding these kind of cool brands or tech brands very, very inspirational for myself and the work that I'm doing for my clients. Do you find yourself kind of leaning that way at any kind of moment when looking at a project, or?
Yes, yeah, I suppose so. Like I said, I don't sort of actively go out looking for them, but I do tend to, if I do notice something out in the wild, then I sometimes might bookmark it for later, or take a screenshot just to add to like a little library. There was a couple of brands which I used to follow on Dribbble as well, because Dribbble has team accounts. I think it was box.com. They had some cool stuff. Dropbox as well. Their team does some cool, like they have a style, a particular style. I don't really like Dropbox's style now, but I used to like their sort of previous branding. They used to have an illustrator called Ryan Putnam on their team, and he used to design a lot of their icons. And then there was a big trend around that a couple of years ago. The Campaign Monitor, they've got some cool stuff, and brands like MailChimp, Evernote, they've all seemed to have these team accounts on Dribbble where their own designers and UX people and illustrators are all part of that team. So although those people are uploading to their own profiles individually, you can see like a bit of a theme between them as well, where obviously they're getting influenced by the brand they work for. So there's loads of Evernote design is a pretty good one. I quite like their style. I would say there's quite a few. Facebook design is good as well, and they've got a whole. I think they've got the URL facebook.design where you can go and sort of view their design guidelines and their style.
Yeah, I'm finding myself. Just recently I took a lot of inspiration from the Tide banking website, because I opened a business account with them, and their website is just really, really clean, bold, and it's really, really nice to look at. And when I open my account, they send me a nice little package which I recorded on Instagram. I might just share it on this podcast as well at some point. We'll kind of get a link out there or something. But it's really cool how it lends itself to its print and packaging and things like that. It's just really, really cool. But yeah, I'm finding myself following these sort of tech brands and getting a lot of inspiration from them. Talking about trends quickly, we're seeing trends to be ever growing in web design. And I remember when Web 2.0 kind of kicked off all those years ago, and you can remember what that looked like, and it's kind of evolved now. So you've got very bootstrappy kind of like look and feel to websites as well these days, and other sort of frameworks that people are using, those styles kind of like push through. So it's kind of minimal. So they're letting the actual framework do the actual talking, and they're doing like a minimal kind of approach to the actual, changes they're making to the actual framework itself. And then you've got influence from like, brands like Apple. We've seen that a lot now in apps, native apps and things like that. And, even Android's, apps for Android are using the Apple kind of styling as well. You've got flat design, which is a major thing. I think last year and the year before, it was pretty big. It still is now, I think. And then I think right now, the one that I've kind of like picked up on is big, bright and bold, like, bright colors, massive headings, large typefaces and things like that. You were talking about trends, just a little while ago. Now, do you follow these trends, I wouldn't say religiously, but let me put it this way, like how close do you follow trends? Or do you find yourself kind of, wanting to start your own one and kind of carry on with that? Or,
I think it's quite important to follow the trends as well. Not, it would be nice to be a trendsetter, but I think to be a trendsetter or trailblazer, I suppose, or something, you're going to need a platform of exposure. So I think it's going to be quite hard for an individual who doesn't have a huge following or doesn't work for a big particular brand to do that. And a lot of the trends are going to be coming out of these sort of all-star designers or big design-led firms and companies. So, it is companies like Dropbox, and it is companies like Evernote and, like you said, Monzo and Tide, especially in the UK, Monzo, who are sort of leading the way with these trends. And, I think it's only natural to not to copy them, but at least just to take inspiration from them. And, if when the world started becoming flat design, it spread throughout the whole web fairly quick. I remember when everything had like angled shadows, like 45-degree shadows, elongated shadows. That trend came really quick, and then it also sort of died off really quick as well. So I wouldn't sort of base my whole product on the current trends if I was designing something, because trends do obviously come and go pretty quick. You need to sort of pick out the fundamentals and the foundations of what a trend is really based on, and then use those. Make sure that you're thinking about like color theory and typography and just general like data flow of information on a page, rather than now all my buttons need to have this 10 pixel border radius, or my drop shadow needs to be a 20 pixel blur. That sort of thing's going to definitely come and go. There's a lot more important things to think about than just the visuals. Maybe that's just my developer hat thinking as well. I think if you are someone who was primarily a designer, they may have a very different opinion. So.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you there. Like, I come from a design background, so for me, I do spend quite a lot of time looking at these little details. So the amount of padding around content within a container, negative space, white space is something I've kind of latched onto recently, and I've picked up a lot of that from inspiration from these tech websites that I mentioned. Clients don't seem to like it though. They seem to get a little bit annoyed and start asking questions about the white space, and they're like, how do we fill the white space up, and can we put some images in there, or a background image, or things like that. So they don't seem to get the concept behind it. And what I just say to them is that it's just there to help the actual design breathe. It helps to lay everything out correctly, and it allows people to see everything nicely. And the bottom line is, do you want that page to convert? And what I mean by that is, if you've got a contact form on there, or if you've got like any kind of call to action, or a product that needs to be added to the basket, if you're overloading that page with needless stuff, needless design elements, you're literally just killing that potential of a conversion right there. So I'm an advocate for a lot of white space and keeping things very, very clean and simple. Whereas before I used to be very design heavy, drop shadows everywhere, and all kinds of aesthetical touches to the actual page and things like that. But that's kind of gone now. So for me, it's all about keeping it clean, keeping it simple. And, at the end of the day, if it's functional and it works, why go, crazy with the look and feel? That's how I feel about it personally.
Yeah, I mean, the project that I'm working on currently, it's we're basically re-platforming this form that the company uses. They currently have a Windows desktop application, which is like the default Windows, like what's the word? Like the default application Windows, where it has like a grey background with small text fields and all the default styling of the buttons. It's a typical sort of Windows 95, Windows 2000 looking application. And there's loads and loads of text fields on the screen, and they've got their staff are mainly sort of data entry staff, where they quickly tab between all these fields, and they're so used to entering this data quite quickly. And what the company wants to do is just make this whole application available on the web, so that people can enter this data on different platforms, and out in the field when they're on an iPad, for example. And one of the biggest challenges I've had with this client is making their fairly dense, small form into something that's usable on the web, and especially usable on a tablet with touch interface as well. So as you can imagine, because it's for touch, everything needs to be a little bit bigger. All the fields they've got like a minimum size they need to be for your fingers, and there needs to be space for like error messages and validation messages and stuff like that. So there needs to be a fairly large amount of free space available for all this extra information that's going to be shown and hidden. And I just remember like the first round of designs that I provided for them, it was completely shot down straight away, and it was just like, why is everything so big? We want everything to fit on one page.
Right.
And it just took a bit of effort and a bit of explanation that we're talking about a website here. We can't really think of a website as a page. It's something that scrolls. It's not like just a static page. A browser could be completely different size on one machine to the next, and then a different shape on a tablet or a different shape on a mobile. So there was a bit of pushback there, but just like you were saying, with the white space and having elements of a certain size and spacing and so forth, it's so important on the web, and it's not always quite apparent to the client, why it's there. And as long as you can explain that well, and they did come round in the end, and they saw the reason for it. Once the actual prototype was built and the wireframes were starting to be built out. So yeah, that's just something to consider, that not everything is always going to be this fixed size and fixed ratio and on this one type of screen. And
exactly,
there's the web can be viewed in so many different ways that you really need to think about all these different scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, I've got clients now who have websites that were built a long time ago, and these websites are using a 960 width sort of grid, and it looks tiny, on a large monitor, but on a size monitor that we're all kind of using now, and it's not responsive either, and it just looks terrible. So as soon as I create like the initial design and the concept for it, and using full width design, it blows their mind, and they kind of like, the first question they ask is, why is all this white space there?
Why is it so small?
Yeah, exactly. What's going on here? Where's the edges? Where's the box that holds the website? so it's about at the same time, it's kind of making them understand how that kind of works, in a responsive environment as well. And it's a bit of I don't know what the word is, but for me to understand that when it was happening, when we were moving from 960 fixed width websites to responsive websites, even I couldn't get my head around it. So for me, it was like this liquid kind of design approach and things like that. It just didn't work for me. I just couldn't get my head around it. But it took a while, and then now it's kind of like you fully understand how it works, and the way devices display information. So I think it's the same thing for the clients. Once they see the different versions of those landing pages on the actual device, I think it kind of like makes it easier for them as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going for it at the moment with a client that had a website that was built like late 90s, and it's got GIFs on it, and it's got Flash files on it which don't even work. and it doesn't even work on mobile. So that's going to be an interesting one to work with.
Yeah.
Going forward. Yeah. We touched on typography as like a major trend right now. For me, I think typography makes or breaks a website. It's so fundamental to get that right in this day and age, especially when more and more web browsers are supporting loads of different types of fonts now. When you've got Google Fonts and all kinds of other libraries which have your fonts set up on there. Now, I want to know from you where you go for your typography inspiration. Do you even go anywhere for that, or do you have a set pairing that you tend to use, or how do you work with typography?
I don't have a set pairing. It depends on the application. If it's like a mobile application that I might be designing, then I will try and stick to the system fonts for the bulk of the content. I just find that when you do use a system font, it just gives the user a sense of familiarity, because they're seeing the same style of text, especially for the body text. For headings and titles and things like that, maybe you can go for something more custom. But for body text, for paragraphs, I tend to stick to system fonts where I can. In terms of like finding fonts and inspiration, I do browse sort of Google Fonts every now and then. I do look for pairings on their specimen pages. They have some pretty good pairings. And other than that, I download most of my fonts from Dafont, Dafont. I think that's where I get most of them from. I've bought a few commercial fonts in the past, but they're few and far between. I think most of the free fonts that I've got, the ones that are okay for personal and commercial use, they're both pretty good. There's a website called fontsinuse.com, which is pretty good. It's a bit like Dribbble for fonts, but it finds like designs out in the wild and tells you what the font is, basically.
Nice.
There's that on Reddit. There's a Reddit subreddit called Font Spotting, where people basically take screenshots or photos of designs, and people are just helping out to identify the fonts. And then a lot of people do supply links to where you can go and download that font if it's free as well, or find similar free ones. So that's pretty good. I go on there now and then. Whatthefont.com, that's pretty good, where you can upload your own screenshots and it gives you a rough idea of what the font is. But I think Fonts in Use is probably the one that I would visit the most often if I was just looking for inspiration. But generally, I probably do the same thing that most people do, is I will type out the word that I'm looking, type out my heading or my, logo text or whatever. And then I'll go to my fonts and I'll select the first one and I'll hit the down arrow and scroll. And, you end up having this massive collection of hundreds and hundreds of fonts, and you could be there for an hour, really.
Exactly.
But then Sketch doesn't have this, but when I used to use Photoshop and Illustrator more, they used to have an option to style your favorite fonts. So I had a few some go-to fonts I used to always use, or that the brand, the client that we were working for at the time, their brand font, I used to just favorite it, so that it's accessible quickly. But Sketch doesn't have that. It'd be nice if they did.
Yeah, that's such a simple feature. I think Sketch should have that by default. It's annoying, spending time going through all these fonts, but I've started to latch on to a pairing that I've kind of picked up. Montserrat as a main title and heading font. Montserrat Black, so that's the boldest you can get. And I think Source Sans is called Source Sans Pro for the body content sort of typeface. So I've been using that quite a lot in certain certain websites I've been working on. And then the clients seem to like it as well. Big, bold headings and nice, legible, clean typeface, which works really well on mobile devices as well. So, yeah. Cool. All right. That's the design side of it. Just going into more, I think, the coding aspect of it and coding inspiration and and things like that. So I'll give you an example of things that I tend to do. So when I'm putting a website together, and you can't show functional elements on a static design, right? So what I tend to do is I do a design, and let's just say we've got a homepage, and on the homepage you might have things like a carousel or an accordion or tabs, things like that, and you can't show that working in a design, but you could probably show it, using some prototyping tool, or get an example from a website and send that link to the client, and they can have a play with it and kind of understand how an accordion works or how a carousel works. But what I tend to find myself doing is I kind of get bored with the standard Bootstrap style carousels and the really default kind of things that are out there. And I tend to find myself going to this website I've been using for years, CodeDrops, and you can go through their blueprints and their playground and find literally thousands and thousands of different ways a simple jQuery powered carousel can be implemented, and using design and human computer interaction principles to make them even better. So I use CodeDrops a lot. So what I tend to do is I tend to go on there and just pull an example from there and implement that into the website that I'm actually working on. So that's something that I use, and it works really well. Okay, it takes a bit of time because you got to optimize it and get it working correctly. Because if you take the code as it is and put it into your website, it's not going to work straight away. So there's things that you've got to mess around with before it starts working. So I tend to spend a lot of time doing that with certain things, and then showing the client, and then getting their sort of feedback on it. And then when they're okay with it, I kind of implement it into the actual website build, if you like. Is there anything that you use out there? Like, I don't know if you've heard of CodeDrops.
Yeah, I've subscribed to CodeDrops in my RSS feed for years now. It's one of the few sort of what's the word? It's one of the few sort of UI code example sort of websites that I've been subscribed to for a long time, and I reckon I go on there once a week at least, just to go and look at their sort of latest examples. And they've always got something that's completely out of the box. So it could be something as simple as 15, 20 different styles of hover states for a button, for example. And some of them are just like, completely left field, where you wouldn't even think to do something like that. Whereas, the others are quite simple, where, the button might just sort of depress slightly or raise slightly. And then, they've got such a variety, and plus they give you all obviously the code samples as well on there as well. So yeah, it's a really good site, CodeDrops. I use that a lot. I tend to go on Smashing Magazine. Again, these are the ones I've sort of subscribed to, the RSS feeds. CSS Tricks. I think I probably visit CSS Tricks every couple of weeks, definitely. Every time I need to look up Flexbox and CSS Grid, I'm definitely going to go to the CSS Tricks articles, because it's always on the. They've just got it sussed. But then otherwise, I just get sort of inspiration from GitHub, from CodePen. Yeah, a few other sites like that. If I was going to be showing some sort of UI work to a client, I would probably stick with CodePen most of the time. Yeah, it makes it very quick to sort of pull in a library if you want. I like the way that the editor works. It's got a lot of the same shortcuts as VS Code. So it's quite easy to sort of translate your workflow from your own editor into CodePen. And then obviously the CodePen, the final output is embeddable as well, so you can embed it on a blog or just share it. So I use CodePen quite a lot.
Cool. Yeah, I find myself in CodePen as well when I'm looking at certain things that I'm looking for, and usually thankfully there's people out there that have used CodePen to create an example.
Yeah. CodePen's like it's basically the Dribbble of code, isn't it? Because Dribbble has always been this site where people really sort of push the boundaries of what they can design. And, like I said earlier, on Dribbble, a lot of the designs are, they're very sandboxed little UI elements. So there might not necessarily be a whole site on there, but you might just have someone who's gone all in on designing this little carousel view, for example. And then you'll get the same sort of thing on CodePen, where someone's gone in and just built this one component and they've really thought about everything and, really pushing the boundaries of what you can do with just HTML, CSS and JavaScript, essentially. And if you just go to the homepage of CodePen and just look at their top picks or whatever their sort of latest trends are, and you just see the ones that are the popular posts, the popular pens on there, some of them are amazing, and you just think, how are people creating this stuff? How are people even thinking of creating this stuff? But a lot of it's not even practical. I mean, I can't imagine using half the stuff in CodePen on an actual website. But it's a good place to go just to give yourself a faith in the industry again, and just remind yourself that there's so much that can be done. So why not try and push the boundary a little bit? Don't just settle for the simple, bootstrap.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm the same. Sometimes I can get lazy, and I'm like, okay, forget it. We'll just let Bootstrap solve my carousel issue, or my accordion issue. We'll just let Bootstrap just carry on with it. And then what I might do is just style it a little bit better, and I'll use the design inspiration that I've picked up from another site, and put that into the actual into my design, and just to give it that little bit of a that sort of finishing, sort of polished look and feel to it, to take it away from the the default Bootstrap kind of look and feel. Because I've a few websites that I've worked on, other designers have picked up on it and said, oh, that's a bit bootstrappy, isn't it? Or someone forgot to change the the styling for the accordion or the carousel. So yeah, I think spending a little bit of time on these sites is is beneficial, and I think it helps us to push ourselves as well, to create better things when we're working.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. But looking at the coding side of things, this was one thing that I always find when I'm trying to find a solution to creating a function in JavaScript, and I'll Google the question, and then always tend to go to Stack Overflow, where someone's asked a similar question, and someone's actually given, well, not someone, but you've got a group of people who've probably put forward 3 or 4 different answers, and what you'll find is none of them are the same. They all do the same thing. One person's code might be 50 lines long, whereas another person's might only be 5. You got things like that, and then what I tend to do is take the best bits that I can make sense of, and then I'll implement that for myself or for a website I'm working on, and kind of learn at the same time. We've spoken about this before in a previous episode, but what I tend to do with things like that and looking at code is trying to find people who explain themselves very well when they write the code. So not just putting the code up there and saying, look, this is it. Here's an example of how it works. Here's the CodePen for it. Bang. That's it. But what I'm trying to find is people explain themselves and then trying to get an understanding of why they've done it that way. Because it might not be the shortest way to do it, but it might very well be the longest way to do it, but it still gets you to, the answer or the solution you want to get to. Mm-hmm. And asking you, because you probably spend a lot more time doing, this kind of coding, especially when you're working in React and things like that. Do you find yourself going to certain individuals maybe that you're following, or certain websites where you're taking these examples and taking inspiration from the actual code and the way it's been written, and are you taking that into your own coding moving forwards? So when you're writing this code in the future for another project, you're already inspired and you've got that all there now, and then you're basically just pushing it out there without having to refer back. So
I suppose
coding
so.
inspiration is a weird one
Yeah,
for me.
I suppose, I suppose that is always happening unintentionally. When I'm on Stack Overflow, for example, I will take note of which answers have got more responses, more replies, or which ones have got more upvotes. It's sometimes the accepted answer is usually the first answer, but if you just take a bit of time to scroll further down the list, you might just find a different take on things.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like you said, the short answers, I find that they maybe overcomplicate things a little bit by making them too short, and sometimes it's not such a bad thing to add a few extra lines of code if it makes it clearer for yourself. Essentially the computer's going to understand, and you're going to end up with the same result. You might save a few bytes here and there, but it needs to be something that you understand as a developer, and something that you can explain to someone else after you've written it as well. So I'll go for I'll go for the solution that I understand the most.
Yeah, it's the same with me. Like, I find myself writing tons of JavaScript to get a simple thing done, and then I think to myself, I'm sure there's an easier way to write this code, and then I find it, but then I don't understand that code.
Yeah, I worked on a project last year, and I got a little snippet off Stack Overflow, which was basically when you got radio buttons, and you've got radio buttons have an on change event, right? So you can detect that by default. But one thing they don't have by default is a deselect event. So when an on change will always return what you changed to, but it completely disregards what you changed from. And this project I was working on, we needed to keep a track of what the last selected radio button was. So I needed a deselect event and to capture that. So anyway, I got someone had figured this out, and it was on Stack Overflow. So I copied and pasted that into my project, and it worked perfect, right? Exactly how I wanted it to work. But then a couple of weeks later, I needed to refactor my code a little bit, and I came across this snippet that I pasted in, and I was just like, all right, I know this works, but I don't understand at all why it works. It just works. And then I just sort of spent an hour or so just renaming the variables and just adding some line breaks and stuff like that, just to make it a bit more readable for myself. And when you're renaming variables, as long as you're renaming all instances of them, it doesn't really matter what that variable is called. It will still work. And I just got it from something that was like 4 lines into like 7 lines or something like that. It didn't make a massive change, but it looked like a lot more code because of the names of the variables were a lot longer and stuff like that.
Right.
But for me now, and for anyone who comes after me, it's perfectly clear what that's for. And I've added comments, I've basically documented it. But what I've done is in the comments, I've left a link to the original Stack Overflow answer. So if for any reason it stops working in the future, then there's a reference back to where it was, and you could potentially ask the original poster for some help again. So I think it's important to do that if you are copying and pasting code from anywhere. Just take a few extra minutes to just understand what it's doing, and then turn it into your own. Don't just blindly copy and paste, and you end up with code that's just sort of hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, I mean that's what I find happening with myself. This website that I'm managing for a client at the moment it's a number plate builder, and the amount of JavaScript I've had to learn and create from scratch. And then later refer to and then fully understand it because I've wrote this my way. It's just brilliant. It just makes complete, sense to me. But if I was to hand you that file, you'd probably have a heart attack because it's not organized in any certain way. I'm not using any kind of shortcuts for certain things. There's stuff in there which could be, in one function, but I've gone and repeated a function to do, something else. But you'd probably find a way to, concatenate all of that and make it a lot easier and save a lot of space in the file as well. So but just looking at that file, I can refer to it in 3 months time, and I'll be able to tell you exactly what each line of code does. profile, and that's because I've kind of like, okay, I picked up the solutions from Stack Overflow and other websites, but what I've done is I've kind of played around with it, broke it apart, put it back together again, and rewritten it in my way, and so it makes full, complete sense to me. Yeah, man, not sure. It's a coding inspiration. Do you ever look at anyone's code and think, well, go to a website, view source, and think, wow, that's amazing?
I don't know about view source, because view source is kind of, it breaks down to the same thing in the end, doesn't it? It's just HTML, and the way that HTML has got there could be a million different ways. It could have all been hand coded. It could have all been computer generated on the fly. So I don't think that's necessarily the way to look at it. But I do, I follow a few people on GitHub, and I do like looking at some of the stuff that they push out. There's a guy called Matthias Binance. Matthias Binance.
Okay.
He's got some good repositories, and he's always releasing like these small little libraries which are useful. There's another guy called Cindersaurus. I think he's most people probably know who he is. Again, always pushing out little useful little libraries and stuff like that. What's his name? Adi Osmani. He wrote the book on JavaScript design patterns. And then again, he tends to tweet a lot, and a lot of his tweets, because he works for the Chrome, somewhere in the Chrome team, and a lot of his tweets are about performance gains and things like that. So he's one of those people who will find a very streamlined way of doing things, which looking at it at first glance, it might not be quite obvious what's happening, but it takes a bit of time to just break things down into something that you understand. But take inspiration from them. There's people like Wes Boss. He's got a bunch of like development courses. He's got a course called JavaScript 30, which I've done, which is a free course. And
I did that one as well. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool because he approaches fairly sort of beginner to intermediate JavaScript concepts, but in an interesting and enjoyable way, rather than your typical, hello world sort of, console logging and stuff like that, which is what a lot of people do. So, he's lets you build these sort of real world applications. Another guy, David Walsh, I subscribe to his blog as well. He posts fairly regularly, and he posts a lot of little tricks, like coding tricks and stuff like that, which is pretty good. Who else? Jen Simmons. She's obviously more on the sort of CSS side of things.
Yeah.
I subscribe to, I don't subscribe to her on anything, but just on Twitter, and on YouTube. She had a channel on YouTube where she did this whole series on like layout, CSS layout, which was really good. So there's a few people like that who I sort of, I watch what they're doing, and I keep an eye on their sort of styles and what they're pushing out.
Yeah, I think it's the same, because at the end of the day, the code is going to be very, very similar, because it's code, isn't it? So, but I think it's the thought process behind it, which makes them what makes them do it that way, and things like that. I think that's really important as well. So, I've asked questions to people like that on Twitter as well, and it's really interesting. And sometimes they'll just say, "It just came to me, and I just done it." I'm like, "Wow, okay, that kind of stuff never comes to me." And always tend to pick it up from other people or other places. Yeah, there's a lot of people that I'm following on Twitter, actually. A lot of JavaScript coders, very, very good coders on there, and I'm just picking up a lot of inspiration from these guys, especially how to spend more time on it, and other sources that I've probably not heard of. And then I'll find that these guys are probably on a Slack group or on a Slack channel, and they're sharing code and working on stuff, or setting each other like little tasks, and like what designers would normally do, create a logo in 30 seconds or things like that. They're setting little tasks for each other. So that's pretty cool. It's the first time I've actually heard of things like that. So I might just get involved with something like that in the future. Yeah,
I used to be a member of this Slack team, which has now moved over to Discord. It's just called Front End Developers, and it's a massive community. It must have thousands of people in it, which is why they moved over to Discord, because they hit their size limit, I think, on Slack. And although I'm not very active in there, but if I ever have an issue that I need solving, they've got like separate channels for like React, for Angular, for Vue, for CSS, HTML, for example. And I've always found that, if you post a question in there, within a couple of hours, you normally got a very good answer, if not the solution. So yeah, I'd like to know about some more Discords or Slack teams where they're open to the public, and you don't want them to be too big, but you just want them to be big enough to be useful. This front-end developers one is quite big, so sometimes there's too much random talk in there, which you need to sift through.
Right.
The other communities I go to are sort of spectrum.chat. So there's quite a few in there. I'm a member of the React one on there. There's one called Front End Cafe, which is a good one. I post myself in there sometimes. I've helped answer other people's questions.
Might need to get an invite to one of these as well, because I'm not in any of these.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the Spectrum is free to join, so you can just go onto spectrum.chat, and then you can search for different communities and just join them. The Front End Developers Discord, I could probably send you an invite, but I'm pretty sure it's free to get onto that as well. So I'll find out how to get onto there and put something in the show notes about how to join these. So I think you just go to their website and just request an invite. So that's pretty good. Obviously, we've got the Inspect Slack team as well. So if anyone wants to join that, then get in touch. Get in touch on Twitter, and we can tell you how to get into there.
Yeah, that'd be pretty good. That needs to grow, I think, that one.
Yeah, I don't know whether we should keep it on Slack or go over to Discord or something else, or even maybe on Spectrum. So maybe if people can get in touch on Twitter, at InspectFM, and let us know if we were to build a community around this podcast, where should we do it? What platform should we use? And it'd be good to just get some people who are interested in the topics that we're talking about, and start a little community of our own. And then Yeah,
I think that's really cool. I think we get beginners, any kind of level, like obviously seasoned veterans as well. That'd be so cool to have like-minded people on our own little group where we can talk about these stuff, and maybe even mentor some of these beginners and people who are just getting involved.
Yeah.
With development. That'd be really cool. I'd like to do that.
Okay, so that's an action point for everyone listening now. If you want to be part of an Inspect podcast community of some sort, get in touch on Twitter at InspectFM. Let us know what sort of platform you'd prefer to use it on, whether that's Slack or Discord or something else that we're not aware of. Then let's get something set up and get a community going.
Sounds good. I'm all up for that. It's all good.
Yeah. In terms of communities, I mean, podcasts, obviously we're a podcast, but I listen to a lot of other podcasts for inspiration as well. I think most of my time listening to any form of audio is normally podcasts, when I'm commuting, when I'm just relaxing as well. So tech-related ones are Syntax, which is Wes Boss and Scott Tolinsky. ATP, Accidental Tech Podcast, which is, it's not really design or development related. It's more tech and Apple related, but it's good inspiration. Shop Talk Show with Chris Coyer and Dave Rupert. There's Layout, which is more design focused. And then there's one that I've started listening to recently called HTML All the Things, which I think it's fairly new. They're up to about 40-50 episodes, I think. And I relate with that one a bit more. They're a bit more similar to what our podcast is, where there's two chaps who work together. They own a business together, and they're just talking about their daily lives and what they experience by doing running their business, and some of the decisions they make. And sometimes they just literally just talk on the podcast as if they're just having a meeting, and it's quite interesting. So
what's that one called?
HTML All the Things.
HTML All the Things, right? I need to check that one out.
So that one's pretty good. Yeah.
Cool. Nice. Okay, so moving on from that, I think the third thing I want to talk about and just quickly touch on, I don't know how much it relates to you, but it's something that's always on my mind, and it's business or business related or life related inspiration. So things you can take from people out there who've already done it and kind of implement it in your way of thinking, and whether that's your everyday life, or if you're running a business, or at work, how to get through the day without stressing out too much. So for me, I've just listed these guys, who I kind of go to for inspiration, and just generally kick up the arse, really, to get me going again after a really hard week. So people like Gary V. I love his podcasts. I've just subscribed to his Facebook Messenger automation, which is pretty cool. It's annoying, but it is pretty cool because you get like an automated message from him every day. And, he kind of helps you to kind of, I know it's not him, but this has all been pre-thought out. And it's a clever way to kind of reach out to your audience as well. So, his kind of talks on, just starting and, getting up on your feet and just getting things done and doing things. It's the most simple thing. It could be the most, simplest task, like, doing your bed sheets. You know what I mean? You could take something that he's used for turning a business into a multi-million pound, enterprise, but you could take that fundamental concept and use it everywhere. So Gary Vee's like, he's amazing, especially with his social media talks that he does. He's got a lot to say, and I think a lot of it is very, very good. And I think anyone can take a leaf from Gary Vee's book, or watch his YouTube videos, and grab his podcast, and definitely turn you into a much more positive person, I think. The other ones are TED Talks. I know you've mentioned TED Talks in the past.
Yeah.
I don't have any general kind of people that I've watched on there. I think anyone that I've kind of picked up. What I like doing is just randomly picking a TED Talk, and I find myself kind of, being pulled into it.
Yeah, they're very engrossing, aren't they? Because they're fairly short, and they're very random. I'm subscribed to the TED Talks Daily podcast and the TED Tech podcast, which is I think that one's weekly. Yeah, so it's constantly just it's in my podcast up next playlist. So I'll just get one in there every now and then, and yeah, they're just all sorts of topics. And the reason I like TED Talks is I like. It's not necessarily the topic, but it's the style of presenting that I find inspiring. Just seeing people up on stage, and just the way they carry themselves is impressive to me. In terms of actual inspiration for sort of business related topics and life general topics, I listen to the Tim Ferriss show, which is quite a good one. I mean, he talks to a lot of entrepreneurs and people who are sort of leaders in their industries. And then more recently, I subscribed to Seth Godin's podcast, which is called Akimbo, which is it's good. It's just Seth Godin just talking by himself on a mic, and it's fairly short, about 20 minutes episode, and he just has like a deep dive. What's the word I'm looking for? When you sort of thoughts just keep going. What's it called?
Oh no, you lost me now.
Oh god. It's like like his train of thought just goes, and he's just talking while he's thinking. It doesn't seem like it's scripted. It just seems like he's just he's got this topic in mind, and he's just riffing off whatever comes to mind. So I quite like his podcast. Tech related, industry related, I suppose. Developer Tea is probably the most sort of business related podcast, which is by Jonathan Control, who was a previous guest on this podcast as well, which was episode 15. And I've always liked Jonathan Control and Developer Tea. He was actually one of the first podcasts I subscribed to, if not the first. And I've been a listener ever since, and he's been going for quite a few years now, like 4 or 5 years. And again, he sort of pushes out a podcast, I think 3 times a week, and they're normally between 10 and 20 minutes long. Just enough to the idea was that it's something that you listen to on your tea break. It's called Developer Tea. And he talks about mainly soft skills, how to sort of carry yourself and how to work with colleagues and clients, and how to think like a senior engineer and stuff like that. It's very, very sort of broad range of topics. And sometimes he'll talk about something which is completely unrelated to web development, but he'll find a little way of tying it in. And it's more about attitudes and things like that, rather than actual, this is how you should write your code.
That's cool.
So yeah, definitely subscribe to Developer Tea. It's probably one of the better ones out there.
Yeah, I'll jump on that one. That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I've been looking at just recently entrepreneur.com. I was following it years ago, but just recently I've kind of I think it's the types of inspirational stories they've been putting out there, which have been really grabbing my attention. So like there's this guy on there who's launched a drinks company, which is taking on the likes of Coca-Cola. And it's like he's produced a drink which is still regarded as a fizzy drink, but it's healthy. It's a healthy alternative to drinking a Coke or a Sprite or a Fanta. But again, these are all startup stories. So it's about people who had an idea and they've just kind of like, telling their story, where they kind of started. And so it's pretty cool. But the other two that I listen to, Joe Rogan and Jack Ma. You probably heard of Joe Rogan. Yeah,
well, I've heard of him. I've never actually listened to his stuff. I know he's got a podcast as well, which is kind of at the top of the charts since just forever. But I haven't subscribed to it. Maybe I should. I don't know. I need to give it a go.
Yeah, no, he's pretty good. And Jack Ma, business stuff, he's amazing. Just some of the stuff he comes out with, just really, strikes a chord with me. And I've been referring to him quite a lot recently.
Okay, yeah, well, I'll definitely gonna subscribe to a few of these then and check them out. Get inspired.
100%. I think, I think that's wrapped up this episode nicely there. Anything you want to add?
No, just one of the other things that I do for inspiration is obviously, everyone's got a phone in their pocket with a camera, and just take photos of things. You see some nice design, you see something with interesting colors, just snap a photo and take it with you, or record a voice memo when inspiration hits, because you just never know when it's going to happen, right? And there's been times where I've walked past a building which has got a nice paint on the side, and you just take a photo of it, and you can to get an idea of how colors sort of sit with each other, and then you can go and incorporate that into your designs later on down the line. So yeah, make use of the tool that's in your pocket, because it's just brilliant.
It is. That's a nice tip. But one thing I do, I take a little bit further. I take a picture, I upload it to pictures, and upload it to Pinterest, to a board, and then what happens? That board will get shared and pinned by hundreds of other people, and it will kind of snowball into more and more inspiration going into different kind of avenues and things like that. But yeah,
that's one way I've definitely become like a influencer, which is what we all want to be, really, don't we?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
All right, wicked. I think let's wrap it up there. So yeah, remember you can get in touch with us on Twitter at InspectFM, and you can find the show notes for this episode and archive of all previous shows on the website inspect.fm. And if you want to get in touch with myself, you can find me on Twitter at Ajay Karwal. And if you want to get in touch with Kay on Twitter, you are at WeAreDelve, which has a number 3 in there, so you're better off just looking at the show notes, because he's just got a rubbish Twitter handle.
It's not my fault.
Yeah, WeAreDelve was taken, right? You need to change your company name.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, thanks for listening, and remember to hit subscribe if you enjoyed the podcast, and consider leaving a rating or a review in Apple Podcasts, and that would be nice. And that's it. Bye from me.
And bye from me. Yeah, that one went on a bit, didn't it? Proper getting into it.